My aunt has a way of looking at you that makes you feel like something she accidentally stepped on. Not with anger. That would almost be easier. No, it's that slow, sweeping glance she does. The kind that starts at your shoes and ends somewhere around your collarbone, like she's doing an inventory and coming up short. I've been on the receiving end of that look since I was 9 years old. By 31, I'd gotten good at pretending I didn't notice. The Thanksgiving before everything changed, she did it the moment I walked through the door. I'd driven 4 hours from DC. My flight was cheaper, but I needed the drive. I needed those 4 hours of highway and bad radio and coffee from a gas station that tasted like burnt plastic because I knew what was waiting for me. I knew who was waiting for me. My aunt's house sits on a cul-de-sac in a suburb of Columbus that looks exactly like every other suburb in Ohio. Manicured, beige, quietly competitive. She'd had the shutters repainted since last year. Hunter green. I notice because noticing things is what I do. It's what I've always done. It's the reason I still have a job that, as far as my family is concerned, doesn't exist. My cousin answered the door before I could knock. He's 28, 6'2", built like someone designed him specifically to make other people feel inadequate. He'd been a linebacker in college, then went federal FBI field agent out of the Charlotte office. My aunt brings this up approximately once every 7 minutes at family gatherings. He smiled when he saw me, and it was a real smile, which I appreciated. Whatever his mother had become, he hadn't. "Hey you," he said. "Long drive? Long enough." He took my coat. I followed him inside. The smell hit me first. Sweet potatoes and candles, my grandmother's recipe for the former, and my aunt's obsession with the latter. She had at least 11 candles lit in the living room alone. I counted. Again, it's what I do. My mother was already there, sitting at the far end of the sectional, holding a glass of wine she was definitely not on her first of. She looked up and her face did that thing. It does. Relief and worry at the same time, like she'd been hoping I'd come and dreading the same moment for different reasons. "Sweetheart." She stood and hugged me. Held on a little longer than usual. I'd asked her once, privately, why she still came to these things. She'd looked at me like the question confused her. "Because she's my sister," she said. "And because someone has to be there with you. That's my mother. She shows up. It's the only armor she has, and she uses it every time." My aunt emerged from the kitchen, holding a dish towel like a scepter. She looked good, I'll give her that. Her hair was fresh, her earrings were gold, and she was wearing that particular expression she saves for family events, warm on the surface, measuring underneath. She air-kissed my cheek. "You made it," she said. "Not so glad you're here. Not it's good to see you. Just, you made it." Like I'd completed an obstacle course by showing up. "I made it," I said. "You look tired." She tilted her head. "Are you sleeping enough? Working too hard at what is it again? The office thing?" "The office thing is what she's called my job for 7 years. I work for a federal agency. I've told her this. She's chosen to hear something closer to I push paper in a cubicle somewhere in DC, which is, I'll admit, a fair description of what my job looks like from the outside. That's also the point. "I'm sleeping fine," I said. "Good. Good." She patted my arm and turned back toward the kitchen. "Your uncle made his famous stuffing. I hope you're not still doing that low-carb thing." I wasn't doing a low-carb thing. I'd never done a low-carb thing. But correcting her required energy I'd decided on the drive up to save for other things. The table seated 14. My aunt's family has a gift for filling rooms. Her youngest was home from his second year of law school, Duke, which she'd already mentioned twice by the time we sat down. Once to me directly and once loudly in the direction of the hallway, where she knew I could hear. Her daughter, who is 3 years younger than me and works in pharmaceutical sales, had brought her boyfriend for the first time. He was pleasant in the way that people are pleasant when they're trying very hard to make a good impression on someone else's family, and are slowly realizing the family is more complicated than advertised. I sat between my mother and a distant cousin I barely knew who spent most of dinner staring at his phone. The first 20 minutes were fine. Football on the TV in the other room. The youngest asking me if I'd been to any good restaurants in DC lately. My uncle, who is, in my honest opinion, a genuinely kind man who married poorly in terms of personality compatibility, refilling water glasses without being asked. Normal. The performance of normal that this family puts on for the first 20 minutes of every gathering before it slides into something else. The slide happened, as it usually does, because of my cousin. Not intentionally. He'd just gotten back from a case. He couldn't say what, just that it had kept him in Charlotte an extra week, and my aunt had apparently decided that his presence at the table was an invitation to perform. "He's been absolutely incredible," she said, to no one in particular and everyone at once. 2 years in, and they're already giving him the difficult cases. I always knew he had it in him. Remember, I said when he was little, I said that boy is going places. My cousin looked at his plate. "Mom, I'm just saying, the FBI doesn't take everyone. They're selective." She let that word stretch slightly. Selective. Some people work in an office for years and never really. She paused. Looked down the table. Looked at me. "Well, some parts are more visible than others." There it was. Some parts are more visible than others. I picked up my fork. I speared a piece of sweet potato. I chewed slowly and I thought about the briefing I'd attended 6 days earlier in a room with no windows and no recording devices, in a building whose address does not appear in any public directory, with 4 other people whose names I will never say out loud to anyone. I thought about what we'd discussed in that room. I thought, she has no idea what invisible actually looks like. "That's true," I said pleasantly. "Some parts are more visible." My aunt smiled, satisfied. My mother refilled her wine. The meal moved on. My aunt pivoted to asking her daughter's boyfriend about his family, which gave him the opportunity to mention that his father had gone to Penn. Which gave her the opportunity to mention that my cousin had gotten into Penn for undergrad, but had chosen Ohio State instead because of the football program, which was a story I had heard so many times that I could have delivered it myself in her cadence, including the pause before football program where she lets the listener absorb the sacrifice of it. I ate my sweet potatoes. I ate my grandmother's green bean recipe, the one my aunt makes now and calls her own. I listened to the table talk and I monitored and I noted and I was, if you asked anyone else sitting there, perfectly pleasant, quiet maybe, unremarkable. The kind of person at the table who you describe later as fine. She seemed fine. A little tired maybe, you know how she is? That's been the goal for 6 years. After dinner, when the dishes were being cleared and the men had migrated toward the television and my aunt's daughter was showing her boyfriend the family photos in the hallway, my aunt found me in the kitchen refilling my water. She'd had 2 glasses of wine and her warmth had thinned to something more honest. "I worry about you," she said, leaning against the counter. "I hope you know that." "I know." You're not building anything, are you?" "No, I don't mean it badly. I just mean you have a degree from a good school. You're smart. You always were. But you've been in that same position for what? 7 years?" 7 years. She shook her head. "And no promotion, no advancement? In 7 years?" "My friend Patty's daughter started at the Treasury Department and within 3 years she was..." "I've been promoted," I said. She blinked. "Oh?" "Several times." I set down my glass. "They just can't announce it the way some agencies do." She stared at me for a moment. Then she made the face. A small, careful smile, the kind you give someone when you've decided they're a little delusional, but you don't want to say so directly. The "oh sweetie" face. The one that means I've chosen not to believe you, but I'm too polite to say it. "Well," she said, "I just want you to be happy." I thanked her. I meant it, actually. The wanting me to be happy part, I think, is real. That's the complicated thing about her. The diminishment isn't malicious, it's just the only language she has for love. I went back to the living room. The football game had ended and my cousin was telling a story about a training exercise, something safe, something he was allowed to tell. His friends had dared him to finish a particular obstacle course in under 9 minutes. He'd done it in 7:43. The table laughed. My aunt beamed. I sat down next to my mother. "You okay?" she said quietly. "Fine. She doesn't know." "I know she doesn't. She never will." I looked at my mother. "I know that too. My mother has always known more than she says. Not specifics. I've protected her from specifics her whole life, even before I took the job, even when I was a teenager keeping track of things she didn't need to know about. But she understands the shape of things. She understands that when I say I can't talk about it, I mean something real. She has never pushed. She has never asked me to explain myself to anyone. I love her so much, it's sometimes hard to look at her directly. My cousin's story wound down. My aunt's daughter came back from the hallway with her boyfriend, and the room rearranged itself into smaller conversations. My cousin ended up next to me. She doesn't mean it, he said quietly. I know. She's proud of me in a way that requires comparison. He picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. It's not about you. It's about, what she can see, what she can point to. I know. He looked at me. He'd tried before, over the years, to get me to say more. He'd asked about my work with the kind of careful curiosity that someone in his position learns to deploy. Not direct questions, just open spaces, invitations. I'd never walked through them. But that night, I don't know why exactly, maybe it was the 4-hour drive or my aunt's face in the kitchen or just the particular exhaustion of 7 years of this. He asked, and I said something I hadn't planned to say. I said the number. Not loudly. Not like a declaration. Just, I said it the way you'd say your zip code, the way you'd say your flight number to the gate agent, quietly. His head turned so fast I heard his neck. He stared at me. Say that again, he said. I did. The color left his face in a way that I hadn't anticipated, a kind of immediate draining that made him look suddenly younger. His jaw tightened. He set down his drink. How long? He said. 6 years. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up slowly and walked to where his mother was sitting, and he bent down and he said something in her ear. I couldn't hear it. I wasn't trying to. What I could see was her face. She had that same self-satisfied expression she'd worn all evening, and then she didn't. It was like watching someone walk through a door and find a completely different room on the other side. The expression didn't fall so much as dissolve. She looked at her son. She looked at me. Her son straightened up. Mom, he said, not unkindly, carefully, the way you speak to someone who's just had news they need a moment with. She doesn't push paper. My aunt opened her mouth, closed it. What does that? It means, he said, that I can't say more than that. But you should probably stop the comparison thing. Just going forward. She looked at me again from across the room. I looked back. I didn't smile. I didn't make any expression that could be read as triumph. I just looked at her the way I've looked at 1,000 things in 1,000 rooms, steadily, neutrally, taking in information without leaking any out. That's the job. That's always been the job. The drive home was 4 hours again, same highway, same bad radio. I stopped at the same gas station and got the same coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, and I drank it in the parking lot for a few minutes before I got back on the road. My phone buzzed somewhere around hour 2. Text from my cousin, she's been quiet since you left. That's rare. I put my phone back in the cup folder. I thought about my aunt's face. About that dissolved expression, the one that appeared when certainty met something it couldn't account for. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd maybe expected. Mostly I felt tired. Mostly I felt the particular exhaustion of having carried something heavy in a crowd for a long time and finally, briefly, setting it down. I'm not the person anyone thinks I am at that table. I'm not the tired 31-year-old with a vague government job and no visible medals and no promotions anyone can Google. Or I am that person, but that person is also something else. Something that exists in rooms without windows, in clearances with numbers, in the gap between what people assume and what the record actually says. The road was quiet. The Ohio plains stretched dark and flat on both sides. I thought about the briefing 6 days ago. I thought about the work. I thought about the years I spent becoming someone who operates without recognition, without announcement, without anyone at a Thanksgiving table being able to point at me and say, there, she is exactly what she appears to be. I thought about how my aunt would talk about my cousin's career at every gathering for the rest of her life. How she would point to what she could see because it's all she knew how to do. I didn't blame her for it. I don't actually. Even now, she was measuring by the only ruler she had. She just didn't know my measurements required a different tool entirely. I got home a little after midnight. I unlocked my apartment, turned on one lamp, didn't bother with the overhead. I poured a glass of water. I stood at the kitchen window for a while looking at nothing in particular. My phone had one more message. My mother. Made it home? I typed back. Yes, you. Yes. She called me, after. I set the glass down. What did she say? Three dots. Long pause. She asked me why you never told her. I stared at that for a moment. Then I typed, because she never asked. She only ever told. My mother read it. I watched the little check mark. She didn't respond for a while. Then I know. Then I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I turned off the lamp. I went to bed. I lay in the dark for a long time, not thinking about the gathering, not thinking about my aunt, not running the conversation back. Just present. Still. The way 6 years of a certain kind of work teaches you to be when there's nothing left to monitor. The ceiling was dark and quiet. I thought, that's enough. That's always been enough. I fell asleep before I could argue with myself about whether that was true. I've thought about that Thanksgiving a lot since then. Not obsessively. I'm not built that way anymore if I ever was. But I think about it the way you think about a door that finally closed after years of sitting open in the wind. You don't mourn it, you just notice the quiet. My aunt is not a villain. I want to be clear about that because the easy version of this story makes her one, and the easy version isn't true. She's a woman who learned early that the only things worth respecting are the things you can point to: titles, addresses, names of institutions people have heard of. She built her whole sense of the world around visibility, around proof, around what can be shown at a dinner table to 14 people who are all quietly measuring each other anyway. That's not evil. That's just a very small ruler applied to a very large world. The thing is, she applied it to me for 31 years and I let her. That's the part people don't talk about, the letting. I could have corrected the record at any point. I chose not to, and I chose it every single time. And I want to be honest about why. Not because I was weak, and not because I didn't care, but because the work required it. Discipline isn't the same as defeat. Staying quiet when you have every reason to speak, when every nerve in your body is telling you to just say it. Just put it down on the table and let them see. That is one of the hardest things a person can learn to do. I learned it. 6 years of a job that exists in rooms with no windows will teach you that, or break you. What happened that evening wasn't revenge. I didn't plan it. I said what I said because I was tired and human, and my cousin asked with real curiosity, and something in me decided it was time to set the weight down. Just briefly, just for a moment. The consequence, my aunt's face dissolving, her son's careful words, the quiet that followed, that wasn't something I engineered. It was just the natural result of truth meeting assumption. That always happens eventually. You can delay it. You can't prevent it. I think about the cause and the effect of it, the long chain of choices that led to that living room in Columbus. My aunt chose to measure me against what she could see. I chose to let her while quietly becoming something she had no category for. My cousin chose honesty over loyalty to his mother's narrative. And my mother, who has driven 4 hours more times than I can count to sit beside me at tables like that, she chose every time to simply be present. No grand gestures, no confrontations, just there. That's the thing about character. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. It's the small choice you make in the kitchen when no one's watching. The thing you don't say when saying it would be easy. The 4-hour drive you make when staying home would be completely justified. Nobody hands you a medal for any of it. Nobody puts it in a frame on the wall. But it builds into something real, something that holds its shape under pressure. And when the moment finally comes, and it always comes, that thing you've been building is what's standing there. I'm not the person my aunt described for 31 years. I never was. But I also know that I couldn't have become who I actually am without those years of being underestimated. Being overlooked teaches you to see clearly. Being dismissed teaches you to be precise. Being invisible teaches you, finally and completely, that your worth was never in the seeing. The ceiling of my apartment was dark and quiet that night. It was enough.